what are some of your reflections and responses to the talks today?
Thank you so much, Kelly. First of all, I'll just mention I'm zooming in from the west coast of Canada, which is Coast Salish territory, also known as Salt Spring Island in British Columbia. I've been living with HIV for about 30 years. I've been involved with the HIV community for most of that time, especially in HIV education and in community-based research. And as Francisco said, I'm part of the HIV and pain study. I also want to acknowledge my privilege, which makes it much easier to manage my health. I'm white, I have a good place to live, I'm financially stable, and I have lots of support from family and friends. I'll also mention I love this HIV in motion. I'd like to be an ambassador of that too, because it's really how I live my life. I've been, I moved to a rural place so I could have more access to nature and be active out in nature, because that has been a major component of my wellness. From Ted's presentation, I do have a few reflections on all of them. He mentions physical activity as a rehabilitation strategy that may reduce disability. And of course, this is absolutely my experience. I have spinal stenosis and disc degeneration, which at times have its intermittent pain, but at times it's been very debilitating for sometimes several months. And also osteoarthritis in my hands and feet, which I've had one surgery to deal with that. But being active when I can, which is a lot lately, it's probably been the thing that's helped me the most with all of these conditions. Basically, being active is like preventative maintenance for me, and avoiding pain, of course, is a great motivator. In terms of frailty, that term frailty, when I first heard it, I was also thinking, I'm not a grandmother. You know, I was probably in my early 50s at the time when I learned that it's actually a clinical term with clinical, and it's clinically measured, and then I completely accepted it. And I really appreciate the point about screening must be connected to meaningful actions and support, not just a label. And yeah, we got to help people do something about their frailty. And also, if they're borderline, that's what would inspire me to go into prevention mode. Like, what can I do to avoid this from getting worse, or slow it down, or get past it even. So yeah, I'm very proactive in managing my health, but I realize, and I'm sure you know, that not everybody is. And I really think interventions need to focus on giving people a lot of support and a lot of resources, whatever they may be. They have to be individually tailored so people can meet their goals. Also in the frailty presentation, I love the point about mobility being more than just movement. You know, it is purpose, independence, and connection. And yeah, I think it's about having a life, right? And being able to get out there. And at times when my back was causing me a lot of problems, you know, my social life became non-existent, really. And then that can lead to depression, and, you know, it just goes in the wrong direction. Also, I think the Silver Clinic sounds amazing. I might have to move to the UK at one point, at some point. And the pain study, of course, I know that quite well. But I do like the whole looking into how clinical and psychosocial care are not integrated, you know, because I've experienced myself and witnessed others that, like depression being a real symptom of pain as your life shrinks from it, of chronic pain, that is, anyway. So that connection with the mental health is really crucial. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'll pass it on to our next speaker.
Thanks, Kath. And just to let you know, you are an ambassador of HIV in Motion. That goes without saying. There you are. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts. So, Richard, over to you.
Okay, better. Now I'm unmuted. Living with HIV and how you age and what happens when you age. The physical activity, the first presentation, definitely. I agree that you need to be involved. You have to do something that is sustainable for yourself, and I believe that the programs that exist are good starting points, but sometimes what happens is as you age, you have more barriers. So you could have access barriers such as access to health services or rehab services. There's barriers when you consider in-person like activity with someone or something that is online, which is what I did during COVID. I was part of the tech study and it was online. It was wonderful. But when it ended, I imagine that some people just stop because they can't afford to carry on. First of all, they can't afford access to technology and the internet, and they don't know how to use it, so they give up if they're not guided. So it's important to have these people that may be more tech savvy involved and stay involved, and how to, because there are so many varying factors, and you talk about a team, as an individual, the team disappears. You're left on your own. So it's important to make sure that there's access to, I guess, a central point where if you need information that relates to varying factors, for instance, I did not know. There's a lot of terminology that is technical that I don't know, but I'm more familiar now with a term like comorbidity or multimorbidity. I mean, those words meant nothing to me before I started to review some of the, like, or look at some of the research projects that have come into play here. There's particular age issues or health issues that increase as you age. So comorbidity becomes a part of that. Like HIV is the first thing you think of, but then you start to deal with other things like arthritis or even decreased vision, and that can change what needs you have to stay active physically. Memory loss, cardiovascular issues, these are all things. It's not a one size fits all solution to developing a strategy for exercise, let's say, and community-based exercise. The surveys are take into account all of the assessments that are presented and what happens, but sometimes the surveys are too technical. They have to be simple enough for an individual to understand what that means, why they're asking these questions, and what's the outcome of that. Like, why in a survey will, for instance, they'll say, okay, you have to increase your water intake. Okay, what's the starting point? Should I have one glass of water and then try to increase to 5? You have to know why to understand what the relationship is with, proper, I guess, keeping yourself hydrated. What's important about that? So there's many aspects you have to know. It's not just one thing. costs also associated with the exercise programs, with what you can do after the research study if you want to progress but can't afford to participate dollar wise. So membership fees to a gym, or costs of using an app, because you might start off free, but then it develops into that. So other people's drop out. Then where you live will also affect what you can access facility wise. So I live in Toronto. I'm lucky. The Y is 2 blocks away if I need to participate. I'm fascinated by what Carolann's talked about, Casey House, and the programs that exist for people that are living with HIV that are under care with Casey House. But what if you don't need Casey House, but you do need that type of programming? That's also important to know, that as a person living in the community, you could have access to these types of programs that understand your body better. So goal identification also is, provide a list of achievable goals and not to try to achieve too many at once. I find it's a good starting point. So let's start with one thing and let's lead to another. Information. For pain, when we talked about pain, I mean, you can see your family doctor and he can prescribe you something for arthritis. But then Francisco was talking about cannabis, people who use that for pain. What if you don't know anything about cannabis? Because you've always, like growing up, cannabis was a no-no. So for older people, how do you inform them about the proper use and the advantages, I guess, for pain management? For treatment, well, you have your goal is to, for me, it's to remain undetectable. So I have regular visits with a doctor, but I think it's more than that. You need, I don't know who to talk to about like nutrition specifically. Somebody has to follow up with you, like what are the avenues for that. And nutrition is important also, as a factor that goes in hand with physical activity. Self-management, how do you take care of yourself if you're not going to be in a facility, but you're going to be out in the community on your own? So lifestyle factors come into play. I'd say you've got your age, but you've also got your cholesterol, your weight, your nutrition, your diet, your physical activity. There's so many factors. And I think that when you talk about frailty, if you don't have this lifestyle approach where many factors are considered, then you become frail. So yes, you can assess your frailty, but what do you do with that? Like, at what point are you starting to consider becoming a better individual health-wise living with HIV? So I guess what I'm saying is you need multi tailored strategies that are meaningful. They mean something to somebody. It's not just participating in a program, but available, creative for individuals, empathetic to the barriers, because one day I could be fine when I'm trying to do mobility exercises, but as soon as that arthritis kicks in, I could be weeks where all I want to do is go for a walk and come back and sit down and just stay sitting, because that's when the pain stops. So it has to be dynamic, and it has, if you want to continue. So I think all of these factors play well into the whole HIV what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? How do I get involved? What will help and what will keep me at, you know, a relative level of comfort so that I can continue aging like I imagine I can, you know? So,
Thank you.
okay.
Thanks, Richard. Um, Thanks for sharing your experience with community-based exercise. You touched on the complexity and you know, I think highlighted really well how it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Um, so what we've got now is Julia spotlighted all of the panelists, which is great. So now is an opportunity to ask some of the panelists and have more of an open discussion. I'm going to go to Kath first, who I think has a question or two for some of the speakers. So Kath, over to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I did have just maybe more of a discussion opener, but for Ted and for all of us really, since he's not here, is just trying to think of ways to support those who have high disability to be more active, like when those barriers are really extreme. And of course, it makes me think of my 93-year-old mother who's going to chair yoga 3 times a week still, and or at times when I've been in places where I'm experiencing high disability, where sometimes the pool is even very challenging, too much resistance, but the pool mostly has been a very useful type of exercise for me. So just wondering if there's other ideas on how to get people who are extremely, have extremely a lot of disability and pain to get people active. That's just the challenging part, is to start for a lot of people. Maybe Carolann, you have some ideas.
Sure, I can address that. So what we tend to do here is part of the self-management program we do for people living with chronic pain or people that have high levels of disability is we have a large interprofessional team here. So we have 4 social service workers, we have a social worker, we have a registered massage therapist, we have 2 rec therapists, myself, oh my gosh, and I'm forgetting some people. We're hiring a dietitian, supposedly, hopefully soon. So with a large team, we can have each person kind of working on different aspects to try and support them. But from my point of view, I always start with small changes. So just getting people to engage in something small, something that's important to them, something that's relevant to them, and then trying to address the barrier. So we actually have like a barrier assessment we use to try and figure out what the barrier is. So for some of my clients, we enact a buddy system. So we find someone to go with them to a local community center, to a pool, maybe just have someone come home with them and be with them to do a little bit of exercise in the home environment. Our rec therapists are really good at helping people navigate the different community centers. Now, I'm very fortunate here. We're in a very resource-rich environment here in Toronto. And in the neighborhood that I specifically work in, there's actually a lot of community centers that are free, but a lot of people don't realize that. So I think starting with small changes and trying to be very positive and supportive and making people recognize that even small changes can be very significant, and if you can build on them, they can create significant changes.
Thanks. Yeah, I really do appreciate the whole idea of the buddy, having a buddy or a group kind of activity, because of course that addresses isolation and helps with mental health stuff as well. So that's great. Thanks.
Oh, and the mental health aspect too. That's the person I forgot on the team. I knew I was forgetting someone. We have a psychotherapist, Kevin, who is absolutely wonderful. So, and our rec therapist does meditation groups with like gongs and crystal bowls. And so we have like a very diverse range of programs for people who are living with HIV. for all ranges of disability. So people might just come in to want to connect more with others, and that's a valid goal to join Casey House.
Wonderful.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from the panelists to each other, or any other questions from the broader audience on the Zoom? I have a question. Maybe it's well, for Natalie and Francisco. I think, as you know, I'm very interested in the concept of episodic disability and how health-related challenges can sometimes be experienced as fluctuating over time and sometimes uncertain. And I'm interested in your thoughts on to what extent is chronic pain or even aspects of frailty potentially experienced as episodic by people living with HIV.
I don't see Natalie. Oh, there you are, Natalie. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh,
I was looking for you on my screen.
So we actually asked about episodic disability as part of our qualitative work. It was really interesting. So our participants, so there was a difference. So HIV professionals weren't sure whether kind of mental frailty, which was often used interchangeably with mental fragility, whether this was cause, component, or part of being frail. But people living with HIV they very much felt that mental frailty was part of frailty, very much so. And that part was more fluctuating and episodic for them. They said that frailty as a whole, they felt was a kind of almost a one-way street, and it didn't really fluctuate, but within that things like their pain did. So they separated the two out, and as such if they were pain wise, if they were having higher levels of pain which impacted their mobility, then their mental, what they class as their mental frailty, very much was episodic. Low pain meant a much better day overall. So the symptoms, I suppose you would say, were episodic, but for them frailty itself did not feel episodic. That felt more like a one-way trajectory.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly, for the question. I think so. My professional perspective is episodic is something that we use, and it means nothing to people living with HIV. Nothing. There's nothing episodic about our living with HIV at all. Like depression is always there. So I understand why we use it and why it's an important policy point as well. So people are able to go into disability payments and things like that with a greater ease. Although that's going to change as we normalize, people love to hear that word, things, we're like any other person with that condition. And so episodic, I don't think it means anything for people now. I think there's a great degree of resignation. Black women with HIV and chronic pain, they know they won't be hurt because they're women and they're Black, and they say so. Indigenous women who, in the West Coast, that we talk to them and have and use substances, they know they won't be heard, and they know that they'll be considered seeking drugs all the time. So there's nothing episodic about any of that. That is a continuum. They're used to it. The only thing that saves the day for most of these folks that do not have access to any of the beautiful things that we try to imagine, including pilots, with all my respect. As I mentioned to you, Kelly, before, the new president or director of the Canadian Institutes of Health Research said no more pilots because they increase just the interest and the hope of people, and then as Mr. Charette said, then we go home and everything collapses. So the one thing that saves the day for me is that those of us who've lived with HIV longer are more resilient, and we're stubborn, and we continue, and we're able to laugh. And trust me, Sarmitha can attest to this. We've laughed and cried and sing in our meetings because people say, what do you want me to do, right? So it's a great degree of resignation. I don't know what new generations living with HIV are going to do because, and I don't mean to say that they're brittle, but it's a totally different approach to it, right? We knew that we were fucked and that we needed to get through somehow. And that's, I think, has been key for us. Thank you.